Hello everybody, my name is Henry Chu and today I'm presenting a research proposal titled Assessing the Impact of Emotional Regulation on Life Satisfaction Amongst Immigrants in LA. So when we look at the process of immigration, we naturally think about the physical, structural, and linguistic changes, learning a new language, navigating complex legal systems, and adapting to a new economical environment. However, what often goes unnoticed is the profound shift in the emotional landscape. For individuals moving from non-Western background to a highly individualistic Western metropolitan hub like Los Angeles, the psychological adaptation is exceptionally complex. In mainstream Western psychological science, emotional expression is heavily universalized. True mental health is often equated with outward vulnerability, emotional openness, and authenticity. Within this dominant paradigm, expressive suppression, which is the conscious inhibition of outward emotional signaling, is routinely pathologized. It is systematically labeled as a maladaptive, unhealthy coping mechanism that decreases life satisfaction and drives up internal distress. But this rigid, Eurocentric approach fundamentally ignores the core value of collectivist cultures. In these settings, emotional restraint isn't a psychological deficit. It is a proactive, deliberate tool used to preserve interpersonal harmony, respect social rules, and maintain group cohesion. Growing up with Eastern cultural values, I saw this firsthand. Emotional restraint was encouraged not out of fear, but out of respect for the collective space. This creates an intense psychological phenomenon for bicultural individuals that we call cultural flipping. This is the exhausting process of constantly navigating and shifting between competing emotional expectations. The interdependent norm of their heritage upbringing versus the highly expressive individualistic demands of the Western society. To process this dynamic, the study established a cross-disciplinary approach that pairs James Gross's process model of emotional regulation with the fundamental tenets of participatory action research, or PAR, which we mentioned in class. According to the Gross's model, emotional regulation strategies generally falls into two categories: antecedent-focused methods like cognitive reappraisal, and response-focused methods like expressive suppression. While Western research consistently linked suppression to diminished well-being, cross-cultural literature paints a completely different picture. Research by Ng 2012 demonstrates that in East Asian collectivist frameworks, where an interdependent model of the self is dominant, expressive suppression serves as a mature tool to prevent social friction. Furthermore, Stupar and their colleagues, 2014, established that the relationship between emotional suppression and subjective well-being is heavily moderated by cultural normativity, meaning how accepted a behavior is in a given environment. When immigrants deal with the friction of the cultural flip, a strategy that looks like maladaptive suppression to the Western therapist might actually satisfy a critical heritage-based familial and communal expectation. We see the high-stakes reality of this mismatch in trauma literature. In 2020, a study found that for individuals experiencing PTSD, the choice and efficiency of emotional regulation are deeply filtered through cultural lenses. Standard Western interventions that force immediate, overt emotional processing can accidentally pathologize adaptive, norm-driven coping mechanisms that non-Western individuals use to keep their family stable during times of crisis. So based on this gap in the literature, my study is guided by three core inquiry questions. First, what are the similarities and differences in how expressive suppression relates to life satisfaction among immigrants and first-generation adults living in Los Angeles? Second, what specific cultural variable acts as the moderator in these associations? And last, which is a qualitative question, how does the community qualitatively view and experience the psychological effects of these emotional regulation processes? So we're testing two central hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, the traditional negative association between expressive suppression and life satisfaction will be significantly moderated by the individual's level of cultural interdependence. Hypothesis 2, for immigrants navigating an environment where an expressive suppression is recognized as a shared social norm, its negative impact on subjective well-being will be significantly minimized or neutralized. This study utilizes an explanatory sequential mixed methods participatory action research design. And I'm partnering with the hypothetical John Bruin Wellness Center, which is a nonprofit in Los Angeles dedicated to supporting immigrants and their children as they navigate dual cultural identities. In the first phase, we're gathering quantitative data from a sample of 100 to 150 immigrants and first-generation adults aged 18 to 65, recruited via snowball sampling through our community partner. Participants will complete a multilingual survey packet featuring the Emotional Regulation Questionnaire (ERQ) to mention suppression and reappraisal, the Satisfaction with Life Scale (SWLS), and customized psychometric items designed to isolate environmental normativity and interdependence. We'll analyze this data using multiple regressions and ANOVAs in SPSS or R to isolate the interaction and moderating the effects of cultural norms on life satisfaction. And through the surface, we'll transition to the qualitative phase, which is a hypothetical scenario. It will be a group hosted safely on site at the John Bruin Wellness Center and co-facilitated by myself and a bilingual staff counselor. These focus groups will dig into the felt friction of the cultural flip, asking questions like, when Western psychological services tell you that keeping emotion inside is always bad, how does that make you feel about your own coping mechanisms? Transcripts will be coded iteratively, and we'll utilize memory checking to ensure participants validate our theme before anything is published. Each research design has constraints. For this study, our sample size of 100 to 150 participants limits our broader generalizability. And our cross-sectional design captures a single point in time rather than longitudinal changes. We're also conscious of self-report and social desirability biases, alongside language barriers that could accidentally exclude less westernized subpopulations. To address this, we're strictly delimiting our geographic scopes to the high-density urban perimeter of Los Angeles and focusing on adults independently navigating workspace and community spaces. Operating within a PAR framework requires transparency. As an Asian immigrant investigator who has personally navigated the daily pressures of the cultural flip, I occupy an insider status. While this built trust and cultural rapport with our participants, it carries a risk of confirmation bias. To maintain objective integrity, we have integrated rigorous peer debriefing sessions and horizontal validation checks directly with our community partner. The ultimate goal of the study is to move beyond abstract theories and catalyze real-world clinical changes. By verifying whether emotional suppression can be adaptive when anchored in its proper cultural context, we aim to completely transform the clinical protocols at the John Bruin Wellness Center and beyond. We want to stop the clinical pathologizing of non-Western coping styles and build a truly inclusive bicultural framework for mental health care. Our dissemination plan is multi-tiered. First, community forums. We'll present our findings directly back to the community at the John Bruin Wellness Center. Second, Joint Family Educational Guide. We'll produce a multilingual resource to help families bridge generational and cross-cultural communication gaps at home. Third, academic outreach. Finally, our mixed methods dataset will be submitted to peer-reviewed cross-cultural psychology journals. By redesigning our psychological lens to value the strengths of collectivism, we can create spaces where immigrants are no longer forced to choose between psychological well-being and their cultural identity. Thank you.